Welcome to Artflakes on CBA TV. My name is Motiu Olawi, the host of the only show in the entire Africa. Yes, I mean it's the entire Africa, where we explore the world within the world of every part of the globe through literature. And today we're going again to China. We're going back to China. Last time we explored the economic, the social, the literary, and the cultural life of the Chinese people with the great writer who is a Chinese writer based in the United States, Professor Wang. And today again, we shall be going into our own world. And then there we'll discuss extensively the world of the Chinese through our creative writing. Meet me on the other side of the studio to extensively explore this. Thank you for joining us once again. We are going back to China. Remember, in the previous episode, we extensively went deeply into the life of the Chinese, the cultural, economic, and literary world of the Chinese within China and even outside China through Professor Wang. And today we shall be discussing extensively the world of this great writer. How far has he gone? What has he achieved? And how relevant is our work to our own demography and the world at large, particularly the Chinese world? Would you mind telling us about your literary journey?
Well, in 1986, I came to America to get my MA, master degree in literature. And I was supposed to take an 18th century American literature class. And I walked into a wrong classroom, and that turned out to be a creative writing. And the professor looked just so unconventional. He looked kind of like, almost like a wild, like crazy poet. And turned out he was a poet, right? And his name is Louis Wash. And I got very curious and sat down, and I wrote my first story. And then the professor wrote on my story, he said, you should start writing a novel. Basically, he said, you have a story to tell. Start writing a novel. And that just like a monk just hit me on the head of on top of your head, just wake up, right? And that was my revelation. I just said, oh my God, I did not know this is the dream I had since I was a little girl, right? I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to tell my story. And that was the only, so I stayed in that wrong class. And that was my only creative writing class I've ever taken. And pretty soon, it's like the wheel of karma, right? And I also believed I was meant to walk into the wrong classroom to meet that professor. And then a few months later, he introduced me to Allen Ginsberg, who was looking for a translator to translate from Chinese poetry into English for the America's very first Chinese American Poetry Festival. And so I worked very closely with Allen Ginsberg for half a year and translating, and through the translation, which I highly recommend to every aspiring poet and writer, translation is our apprenticeship, right? And into poetry and also learning another language. So yeah, during the process of translation and preparing for the festival, I became a good friend with Allen Ginsberg and Gary Snyder, John Ashbery, all those like American giants, right? and also became friends with Bei Dao, Gu Chen, the Chinese mystic school poets. And I started writing my own poetry. And so this is how I started writing story, novel, and poetry all at the same time. Just that day, I walked into a wrong classroom, and I have never stopped.
So how would you describe yourself as a writer?
I write about 2 to 3 hours every day, right? When I sit down, that's how long I can sit at the table. And I like movements. I'm also a singer, I'm a dancer, right? And I'm a photographer, and I'm a cook. When I'm not, but I'm a writer, I'm a poet, like every minute, even during my sleep, right? Actually, during my sleep, I'm 100% a poet, right? My best poem, the most difficult problems is when I'm sleeping. Like all my problems are solved, all the revelation, inspiration comes out of my dreams, right? And between the moment between when I wake up, before I'm fully awake, right? And sometimes 3, sometimes 5, sometimes 6. When I wake up, upon the wake up, I started paying attention what's coming to me, what I should do today, and what problem, how I'm going to solve the problem, right? What poem am I going to write? So in that sense, I'm writing 24/7. I never stop writing, right? And I think for a true artist, for a true writer and poet, this is how we write, you know, and there's no stop, you know, and because we pay attention, right? When we go out, we look, right? When we hear, we listen, right? And we smell, and we walk, right? Every step, every sniff, every sight, right? Every sound, right? We feel it. We connect it directly to our heart, and because our heart is always open, right? And as Rilke, the German poet, right, said, you know, in his Write a Letter to a Young Poet, right? We must listen, look at the world, and smell the world as if we were newborn.
From my exploration of your work, I've checked most of the writings that you have online and some of your publications. I found out that you believe more in simplistic style of writing. Why have you decided to choose this pattern of conveying your message to your audience or your readers?
Right. Well, that's in the beginning. That's because my when I write in English, my vocabulary was very limited, right? And then as time went on, I realized a lot of the so-called complicated, difficult poems, right? I felt they're hiding something, right? And especially when I started teaching, when you're teaching, that's when you really start learning, right? And because you really have to know what you are talking about, you know. And the first assignment I give my students is take out all the adjectives, take out all the adverbs, take out all the extra words, right? And then see what else is left. If the poem cannot stand without the decoration, then it's not a poem, right? And of course, I have to practice what I preach, right? And that's also my nature, because I know I am never a person who wears jewelry, who wears makeup, right? And I don't like shopping, you know. I like to live very simply, and I believe that like the most simple form is the most difficult because you cannot hide behind the makeup. You cannot hide behind the cheap jewelry, right? And occasionally, and also depends on the content, right? For example, you have that book, My Name is Immigrant, the title, the opening poem, right? Things we carry across the sea, right? You know, how can you use any poetic device, really, right? Because all the experiences, emotions from all those immigrants, you know, drifting across the sea is already the best poetry one can ever write, right? Any of my own, like trying to beautify them, right, with my so-called poetic device, would be insulting, would be, you know, an insult to their emotions, to their reality. So that is also my philosophy, especially, you know, in my recent work, I really, really try to bring out other people's voices, and I am just a vehicle for them. So what I'm strive for is to bring out their true, genuine, the most fundamental voice, right? Without inserting my own ego, right? So that's why I think they may appear simple, but they are not, you know. And the simplicity is an illusion.
All right, Wang, I want us to go now into the exploration of your literary world. You've done a lot of literary work of arts. You've presented a lot of them orally, autographically. Would you mind exploring with us a couple of some of your work? Let's start with My Name is Immigrant, especially the Immigrant Carol. What inspired you to write this poem?
Well, it is a real story. That is my own experience. And I wrote it for Facebook. A lot of poems actually came out of my posting on Facebook. I'm using my Facebook as my platform now, to communicate and hopefully to inspire some people. And so that one is, I wrote it for Christmas Eve, and it just went viral. I wrote it in 5 minutes because it was a real story, and was very simple. And it's a story about Christmas. It's an immigration's Christmas story, right? And you know, the traditional Christmas story, the most icon one is the film, that This Is a Good Life, right? You know, and I want to write a poem in a different perspective, right? And even though for immigrants, for me at the time, life was so difficult, right? But when someone showed me a gesture, that was the saving grace, right? And that kept me go on till I am now, right? I probably would not have survived that without that person taking me to his home for a Christmas Eve dinner.
One thing I found out there is that you were rescued by a non-Chinese, but you were exploited by your fellow Chinese when you first came to the United States. So look at humanity in this context, where you feel that your people would have helped you, they failed too.
That's a story, that's a poem. I would say, you know, kindness has no border, and cruelty has no border, right? And has no color. Kindness has no color. It has no border, right? It's the same. Every race, every country, every culture has cruelty, and also has kindness, has love, right? So, yeah, my landlady, even though she was Chinese, but she was a landlady, right? And to collect money and kick out people who don't have money to pay the rent. That's her nature, right? And other immigrants, when they sense another immigrant needs help, they reach out a hand to that person. That is also human nature, right? If that person someday became a landlord, he probably would do the same thing, right? And that's why I made a pledge when I was very young. No matter how famous, how much money I make, how powerful I become, I will never be mean to anybody, right? And that's the pledge I made when I was very young, right? And that's the teaching I gave to my kids. I said, you don't have to go to Harvard, right? You can go to you don't even need to go to college, but you have to be kind. I would not tolerate any violence or cruelty and meanness, And that's how my two sons grew up, and they are kind. They both, are in college, and they are both very kind. They each has their own personality, but I'm very, very happy and satisfied that they have turned out to be good people.
Yeah. You're right. Yeah. Individualism should be considered. That is what led to even the failure of the typologists and the advent of psychologists. There wasn't anything like psychology before. So it is important we consider individual traits rather than considering their demography or where they come from to determine or how we describe them. So I guess people must have learned a lot of lessons from your life. Let's go into this second part. But before we go into this part, I would want our viewers at home to watch this very short clip, which has to do with the rendering of a poem titled Things We Carry Across the Sea by Wang. Then when we come back, we shall explore in detail with the great woman on the screen with us.
We carry tears in our eyes. Goodbye, Father. Goodbye, Mother. We carry soil in small bags. May home never fade in our hearts. We carry names, stories, memories of our villages, fields, boats. We carry scars from proxy wars of greed. We carry carnage of mining, droughts, floods, genocides. We carry dust of our families and neighbors incinerated in mushroom clouds. We carry our islands sinking under the sea. We carry our hands, feet, bones, hearts, and best minds for a new life. We carry diplomas, medicine, engineer, nurse, education, math, poetry, even if they mean nothing to the other shore. We carry railroads, plantations, laundromats, bodegas, taco trucks, farms, factories, nursing homes, hospitals, schools, temples built on our ancestors' backs. We carry old homes along the spine, new dreams in our chests. We carry yesterday, today, and tomorrow. We're orphans of the wars forced upon us. We're refugees of the sea rising from industrial wastes. And we carry our mother tongues.
I,
Hub, Lieb,
Amor, love,
平安
Salam,
Shalom,
paz, peace,
希望
Amal,
Hoffnung,
esperanza, hope, hope, hope. As we drift in our rubber boats from shore to shore.
This is really an interesting poem. Things we carry across the sea. What are those things we carry across the sea that you just presented? The title is hooky and it's catchy. What is this poem all about?
The poem was inspired by that 3-year-old boy, the Syrian boy, who drowned in the sea and washed up on the shore. And when I saw that image, I just cried and cried and cried. And in fact, a lot of poems in that book, I just cried so much, right? And I just felt I cannot live unless I write a poem, right? And so that poem I wrote really fast. I just wrote in like 5 to 8 minutes, you know, and then it just became viral, that poem, right? And I just felt, and each poem, in that poem particularly, and several other poems, I was communicating directly with that Syrian boy. I was communicating directly with all the immigrants drifting across the sea, all the Asian people, Vietnamese people, Chinese people, African people, and Middle Eastern people, right? And South American and Central American when they walked, whether they walk across the desert or drifted across the ocean, right? And they became me, I became them, because I know how they felt, because I am an immigrant myself, right? Even though I did not have to suffer the ordeal, they have suffered, right? And because of my own experience growing up and as an immigrant, I could still feel, right? I could reach them. I can never write a poem just pretending. And so that poem, even though it's simple, I would say it's also very heavy. I would say it carries a lot of weight, right? Because it's the result of that my communication with all those people alive and dead, right? And with all the spirits, and all their tears and their hopes, their despair, their pain, and also their joy, right? And so, yeah, it carries a lot of weight.
On the last note in the exploration of your work, I would want us to consider one poem I got, fortunately, while I was exploring your literary work online. I got this, and before I go deeply into this, I'm just going to mention the title. Then we'll have to look at how this was rendered, and then we go deeply into the exploration. What is this poem all about? Let's watch, and when we come back, you get to discuss what I'm talking about here.
A doctor watching sunset with his 87-year-old patient in Wuhan. I don't know his name. My friend told me he's from Shanghai, volunteered to go to Wuhan in the lockdown. I don't know how long he has been at his shift, but I feel his hunger and thirst. Once you put on the gear, you are locked in 4 to 6 hours. No food, no water, no bathroom. I don't know his age, but I know he misses his wife if he's married, worries about their child's homework, parents' health, their daily meals, their safety. I can't see his eyes, but I know he is exhausted, mourning his colleagues who fell from the virus and overwork. Yet when his patient whispers, "I haven't seen the sun for a whole month," he stops the gurney. He's wheeling him to the CT building and says, "I haven't been outside for a month either. Let's watch." So the doctor and patient, two strangers, stand still in the empty street, watching the sun setting on Wuhan. 87 years old and sick with the virus. This might be his last glimpse of the sun. The photo doesn't show their faces, but I see their ecstasy reaching the sky as they bathe in the light, as their hands raise to hope. The photo doesn't carry their voice, but I hear the symphony of their hearts together. Baton, baton, baton. Love this life, no matter how old and fragile. Love this sunset, even if it were the last. Love this earth, our only home, until we know who we are and why we're here. Two strangers, yet as loving as family can be, as kind as humanity can be, as close to God as the earthlings can reach. At the sunset of Wuhan, through this purity of love, this is what keeps the world going. Love is what will shake us, Zheng, out of our confinement, Kun. All the lies, greed, and violence will end in the trash can of history. But this love will shine as the crown jewel of tomorrow.
Yeah, a doctor watching sunset with his patient in Wuhan. Wuhan has become a very popular place today because of coronavirus. And you've conveyed very powerful message for those who can get it clearly. But for the sake of those who couldn't get the lyrical pattern you use to convey your message, would you mind exploring that poem with us? A doctor watching sunset with his patient in Wuhan.
That's my latest poem. And a friend of mine from China forwarded that photo to me. And when I saw that, I just knew everything that the Chinese people in Wuhan went through. And also I was just overwhelmed by the love and compassion and the empathy that, and what is going on, the energy that's going on between those two people, right? And the doctor was a young man, and the patient was 87-year-old musician, right, sick with the virus. At that time, when I wrote that poem, I did not know their age, I did not know their names, and all I saw was that picture, but it says everything, right? So I wrote that poem. Then only after I finished, I asked my friend, "Do you know anything about those two people?" And then she told me the doctor came from Shanghai, you know, the old patient. I thought in the beginning, I thought it was a child, right? And all that, you know, I knew nothing, but the emotion I wrote before I knew anything is all came out. Basically, that's the poem, right?
There's no doubt from all what you have explored so far, and from what I've read in some of your work, your literary work, I mean, that you extensively discuss the theme of unity and love. You you narrowed most of your write-up towards that unity and love. What could have inspired you to focus more on expression? Because William Shakespeare, if you look at most of the writings of William Shakespeare, whether poetry or even plays or drama, I mean, you will notice that there is always the theme of love from the beginning. And that time, there was too much of gap between the rich and the poor. So I felt that's to bridge the gap. That's why he came up with that. What led to your narrowing your own write-up towards this line too? I mean, with unity.
I wouldn't call it narrow. I call it very broad. You know, that's the whole humanity and civilization should be boiled down to that: love and unity. What else is left, right? You know, money is not important to me, right? And money comes and goes, right? As long as I have enough to live, right? As long as I have shelter, right? And but love and unity is what keeps us going, really, right? And so my next book of poetry is called The River in Our Blood, right? And that's dedicated to the Mother Earth, right? I'm speaking in all kinds of voice, right? The voice of trees, the voice of river, the voice of mountains, the voice of a spider, the voice of octopus, the voice even a virus. There's an ode to virus, right? And because virus, we are part of the virus. We are virus, and virus is us, you know, because in the basic unit of our cells, right? In the center, the heart is a virus, you know, and that's how life is created, right? And so, yeah, and I have several other projects, and you know, I have been asked many times for years to write a young adult book based on my experience of reading banned books, you know, secretly, right, the underground book club. And I also have a novel, and it's done, and I need to finalize it and get it published somewhere. And then the rest, I'll just keep writing poetry, and also to travel around the world with my bag of poetry, right, and art, right, and I have a project called Kinship of Rivers.
On the final note, before I round up my session with you, you will have to help me to explore this side. This is no longer the literary world. What I found out is that every writer has the stage in their life. I mean the creative writers. When they get to a stage, they switch from just writing to social activism. What would you like to tell us about your initiative called Kinship of Rivers? What is it about, and how far have you gone with the operation of this foundation or this initiative or social initiative?
Okay, it started with in 2012, and I got this vision on top of the Everest, and that I want to, when I saw the Tibetan prayer flags, right, and their concept is Tibetan prayer flags is made of like sutra, right, and so the idea is every time the wind blows, a prayer is uttered, right, through the wind and through the water, through the mountain, across mountains, across rivers. So at that time, I already had 12 books published, and I just thought, no matter how much I publish, it's still just sitting there. It's just me. I want to step into this big river of universe energy, right? And the prayer for peace and love. How do I do that, right? And when I saw the prayer flags fluttering in the wind on Everest, and the vision came to me, and I told myself, I'm going to travel around the world, around the rivers in the world, and to teach people to gather poetry, and then, have them like draw their poems and draw like nature on the fabric. And then I will sew them together, and then just install them along the river. And I started with 2 rivers, Mississippi and Yangtze. That's the Chinese river. And then I just expanded this project to the Ganges, to Amazon, and last year I went to the Nile, right? And I carry them, I install them on the Kilimanjaro, and then, the 3 times on the Everest, right? So all those prayer flags, like every time the wind blows at them, people's wishes and their prayer for peace and love is spread through the wind to the whole world, right? And so I've done like close to 4,000 prayer flags, 4,000 poems, 4,000 prayers, 4,000 pieces of art, right? And across Africa, Asia, America, South America, and Europe, right? All these, the only place I haven't been to is Antarctica and Australia and New Zealand, right? And I'm hoping to go to Arctic Circle and Alaska and Mekong, and that's the reason I was late with you. Is I was interviewing with a Romanian poet and artist, and he's translating My Name is Immigrant, that book, into Romanian, and then they're going to have a huge festival and doing Kinship of River at the Danube River. So I'm just like so ecstatic, right? And this is the biggest wealth, right, I could get, right? To meet people, to create beauty, poetry, to have people pledge to protect river, to protect Mother Earth. And I dedicated the rest of my life to this kind of mission. That is my vocation, and that is my mission and my vision. So, and I really want to go back to Africa.
You have really had impact on the life of the people, not only in the academia, but also outside the academic society. Before you go, there's only one thing I want you to do. I want you to convey a message in English language and in Chinese to our Chinese speakers across the globe, and to our English speakers listening to us from every corner of the world. Your final message to them.
There's much more in life other than power and money, right? And the ultimate goal, or the ultimate expression for us to be alive, is creativity, is the freedom to express our true emotion and our true nature and our true heart. And that it has to come through poetry, through art, through singing and dancing. So always follow your heart. You will never go wrong. Always follow the river. You will never get lost. Always follow your heart. You will never get lost. And you will find the true meaning of life, right? 跟中国人就是说，永远就是说，我们过日子吧，我们为什么要活着？我们活着的最终目的是什么？最终目的是，我们要如何来表达我们真正的情感，我们内心的世界。当我们能达到那个地步，就是我们有这个自由， 能彻底的表达我们内心的世界，我们真正的自我，那个时候我们才是我们最富有的财产。我们也会获得最大的自由。所以呢，我希望在非洲的中国年轻人和中国人，就是永远就是说照着你心里所最想望的愿望去做，你就绝对不会迷失方向的。就好像我们美国有一个成语，就是说跟着河走，你永远不会迷路。然后呢，把它变成那个就是说我们事业和人生的道路呢，就是说跟着你的心走，你永远不会迷路。谢谢。
Thank you so much, Professor Ping. This is where we have to end this session. You have extensively explored the Chinese world. Anyone who doesn't know anything about the Chinese literary world before would have got a lot of information relevant for them to operate in the literary world of the Chinese. 大谢. So, viewers at home, thank you so much for watching CBA TV, especially Artflakes. And this is where we're running up this session. I hope next time we shall meet again to discuss the world of writer in another part of the globe. This gives us opportunity to live in our own home and get to know everything happening in every corner of the world without even getting there physically. So keep watching Artflakes on CBA if you want to really take yourself to every part of the world without leaving your home. Thank you.